Well, hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all of those things. Welcome to the VS Code live stream. This week we have a release party for you. That means a new VS Code release, some new features, and we're going to show them to you. So that's what we're doing today. A couple of quick things. If you joined us before, you know what I'm about to say, and that's go to YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you're already there, you're in the right place. Do what feels natural there. Yeah, check it out right there, youtube.com/code. Also, check us out on TikTok. We've been hanging out there, so you can follow us there, tiktok.com/VSCode. All right, that stuff out of the way. 2 additional things for you this week. One of them is, if you haven't been to meetup.com, we have a group there. We do have a meetup group. And the benefits of being in the meetup group are that you're going to know about things before other people. So if you're part of the group, we can let you know when those things are, whoa, that's quite the URL. We got to figure out a way to shorten that. All right, we're going to work on that. In the meantime, you type in that gigantic URL and join the meetup group. And then lastly, come back next week for our next live stream. Don't forget to do that. Code.visualstudio.com/live stream, and you can see what's coming up next. Please let us know if you have things that you'd like to see in our live stream. Would you like to be on our live stream? That's not out of the realm of possibility, but you got to let us know. All right. So tell us, help us help you so that we can know what you'd like to see more of and less of. All right. All of the requisite housekeeping in order. Let's get into our live stream today. This is our release party, and we've got a couple different things to talk about today. One of them is something called language auto detection, and that's how Visual Studio Code knows what language you're trying to work in. And we've tried to make some improvements in this area for a number of different reasons. Mostly for getting started, but there's some other reasons as well. And to talk about that, I want to invite Sana Ajani to the live stream, PM on the VS Code team, to tell us more about the improvements in language auto detection.
Hello, Bert. Good morning. All right.
Cheers.
So yeah, I want to talk about the VS Code auto detection, and that's something that we recently added. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Cool. So something that we started doing a lot of user studies with new users, and we realized that something that we kept seeing was that a lot of people would come onto VS Code, a lot of new users, click on this new file, and then kind of see this empty editor and not really know what to do or like how to actually, if they wanted to code in Python, if they wanted to code in Java, like how to actually get the support for that language. The concept of extensions is kind of sometimes confusing for users that they have to install an extension for each language. So one thing that we did, like an iteration we did, was add this hint. So we added this hint that a user could select a language from this auto picker and then go ahead and, once they pick a language, you can see that the bottom picker over here changes. Now they get coloring, coloring and syntax highlighting. And often, if they don't have the extension already installed, they'll see a notification with a recommendation to install that language. So we saw that this was happening, but then another thing that one of our engineers in our team, Tyler, found was this really cool library called GuessLang. It's a library that auto detects languages. Up to 30 languages are supported, and we compressed that model and it shipped it inside VS Code. So now we query this model locally, and it can detect programming languages with a guessing accuracy of like 90% or higher. So I can give you a couple examples of that. So right now I've got a couple examples pulled up of different kinds of programming snippets. So this is, for instance, a C++ programming snippet. If I were to go back to VS Code and open a new file and just paste this snippet, you can see that VS Code auto detected it. I didn't actually change or use the language picker, but over here you see that it's now C++. So let's try this again, right? I'll open a new file up, and then this time let's do a Java program, for instance. Same thing, right? So this is auto-detected really quickly and with fairly good accuracy. The size of the snippet depends, so I'm using larger ones for now for an example. But we have different languages supported. So here's an example of Visual Basic. If that's what you're doing in VS Code, you can also see that that's also supported. So this is really cool, and it also works in different cases. So say, for instance, I create a file that doesn't have an extension type. So say I just create a file called release party, but I'm not going to call it .py or .java. I'm just going to call it release party. and also paste another example. So now, because even though this doesn't have a file extension to let VS Code know what kind of language it is, the auto detection feature still is able to recognize it. So even if I were to close this file and then reopen it, we still have that Visual Basic, support in this untitled file, new file. And this also works for notebooks, which is really cool. So for instance, I'm going to open up this Jupyter notebook over here. So in the notebook cells, there's also a similar language picker concept. So this is, a Python picker, but let me go ahead and, for instance, copy this Java example again. And I can edit this notebook cell, and instead of Python, I'm going to paste this Java code and then click on this language picker, click on auto detect, and you can see that it changes within the Jupyter notebook cell to be Java too. So there's lots of different cases where we are kind of using this auto detection feature. We want to make it easier for, again, new users who might just open up a new file and you'd be copying a tutorial or following a course and kind of just paste code in here and also get that support and extension, recommendation when they need it. So that's the new feature I wanted to share.
So a couple of different questions here, Sana. Let's get the requisite one out. That is here. Who asked? David Tran said, "Is that the Dracula theme?" You knew the question was coming, so the theme.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the Dracula. Yeah, you're right. Good eye.
Wow, good call, David. Calling out the theme just by looking at it. Yeah. So let's see here. How many lines do you have to? Somebody asked how many lines you have to type before it actually picks up and knows, what language it is. And that was, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's not perfect yet, and we just shipped this. We're still learning from what languages it supports and what's the size of the snippet. I'd say from our internal testing of this feature, I think 5 to 6 lines of a snippet usually works. But again, it's different if the languages are very similar, like TypeScript and JavaScript. You might need more. C++ and C, you might need some more. So in those cases, you might need a larger snippet.
Okay, and that question came from one learner. So Omar is asking, is the update out yet? Is the VS Code update out? It should be, right?
Yeah, it should be. I think we're releasing later today. So this is kind of a sneak peek. And one more thing I can mention is that if you don't want this feature, you can also turn it off. So this is hidden behind a setting. So if you don't want this feature, you can just turn this false. But it's shipped with auto. So you'll always have this, but you can turn it off if you want to.
Nice. A lot of people mentioning the shorts. Acid Haas said, "I'd like to add that I love the channel. Keep the shorts coming. They're excellent." So fun fact, folks, Sana was the person who originally suggested that we start posting videos to TikTok. It was over a year ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, man. I was spending all of quarantine on TikTok.
Yeah. So Sana, you can thank Sana for the shorts and the TikToks because that's where it originated. Okay. Let's see. What else do we have here? What other questions? Blah, blah, blah. Just looking through. Let's see here. Sham says, "Wow, would love the auto detect feature. It's very annoying to type the C extension for a C file." Interesting. Very annoying to type file extensions.
Yeah.
Very nice work. Yeah. Acid Haas says, "Nice work, Sana." I agree. This is very cool, especially when people are first learning to code and they have to pick and edit, open it. I've noticed this with a lot of the younger generation too, who hasn't not familiar with a file system, right? And so they don't know that they have to save the file and they don't know what a file extension is, right? And so this makes that a lot easier.
Oh, I see another question about, do you need internet to enable this? That's a good question. We now ship this model. We're using the guestling libraries. We shipped it inside VS Code, so the model is queried locally. So we don't actually send code somewhere to be able to do this. It's all done inside VS Code. So yes, you can do it offline.
All right, and Batu Boris says, "Say a random language, please." I think he just wants you to say a random language. Just go for it.
Random language? Kotlin? I don't know. Try PHP. What? Should I try it? Should I try that?
I don't know. I don't know if that's what they wanted, but hopefully that was it. Hey, look, we're just trying to make you happy. All right. Thank you so much, Sana. Appreciate it. That was awesome. All right. Next up, we have a less of a VS Code feature and more of a TypeScript feature. Yes. And to talk about TypeScript 4.4 to be exact, I'd like to welcome Daniel Rosenwasser, PM on the TypeScript team, to the stream. What's up, Daniel?
Not much, Berg. I mean, well, a ton because VS Code just came out and TypeScript 4.4 just came out as well. So
All
I'm
right.
really
So, what is new in TypeScript 4.4? Can I use variables now?
yeah, variables are a big thing. So you should really get on top of those. Can you first of all, can you see my screen well? Is it big enough?
Could you, yeah, could you go one more up? Would that be okay?
Whew, okay, you're asking a
Boom.
lot, but
All right.
yeah, on this screen, all right. So one really cool feature that I want to talk about for just a second. This is one that's maybe a little bit more editor side because when we develop TypeScript, we're not just thinking about the language. We're also thinking about like how it integrates into something like VS Code, right? Because the whole experience is part of it. And one of the pain points that we've heard for a long time from both JavaScript and TypeScript users alike is a lot of the time it's really hard to keep track of the sorts of variables that you're passing into a function, right? So like, for example, here you've got this color class, and it takes a red and a green and a blue. And let's say like you decide to new this thing up, right? So like from, stuff like signature help will tell us like this is a red and a green and a blue, but like, let's say, let's say that I type this out, right? I've got a new color. But once I actually have written this out, at a glance, it's not totally clear. Now, like you and I might be familiar with red and green and blue being like the standard sort of order of things, but someone else might not. And especially if like, let's say we added some constructors, right? So we added two new constructors, one which takes a format called HSL, which is hue, saturation, and lightness, and one that just takes a plain, triple hex value, right? Now let's say that we switch this to HSL. Someone who's less used to this format might not be as aware of like what these things actually mean. And so people get around this in JavaScript by passing like one object literal where they'll like, have a field called red and green and blue or hue and saturation lightness or whatever. One of the things that we've added for TypeScript 4.4 and VS Code is this new feature called inlay hints. So I'm just going to turn this on for what are called, or let's just say parameters and parameter names for now. So all of a sudden, I'm getting this friendly sort of ghost text here, right? I've got kind and hue and saturation and lightness. And so what this feature is called inlay hints. It'll basically provide us with some sort of hint about what's going on when I call a function or call a constructor or something like that. And so I can also, remove this thing and all of the text updates in these little inlay hints. And so this might feel like kind of a toy example, right? It's red, green, and blue, or it's hue and saturation lightness, and that's plenty. But what if you ended up with a function that had a lot of really complicated variable names? And so like let's just imagine some crazy new UI library or something like that, where now if you have like 14 parameters or something like that, you don't really have to worry about this sort of thing. So this is like again, this is also a demo, right? Like there is no library that looks like this and names its variables like this, but this is kind of like a good thing to keep in mind, right? Like maybe there are other times where you've hit a similar sort of function where you've got like way too many parameters, you don't remember the order of them exactly, and now your editor is going to take away the overhead of trying to like look over and over again to see what the variable names are or the parameter names are. So this is one that's really neat, I think. And the cool thing about this is it's not necessarily just parameter names. So as an example, you can also turn on some other inlay hints as well. So for example, I just turned on return type annotation hints. So what I can do now is let's say that I just return the number 10 here. This thing just updates the number. If you return nothing, it's void. And the thing about this is it's not adding text to your file. It's just providing some sort of hint of something that might be valid in this file, but gives you some contextual information. So like if I actually wrote out the annotation here, if I wrote number or void or whatever, this is an error. I guess let's just switch to void. Then you don't get the inlay hint. But if you decide, hey, I actually just want to let inference in TypeScript do its thing, this is super helpful. There's also other things like you can map over a set of values. So let's say you do 1, 2, 2, 3, and then you hit dot map, and you say x, x. And so there is a little bit of UX that we're polishing off, and that's part of why this is not enabled by default. But you can start using this today. And so like you add a set of parentheses. This looks a little bit more presentable. You can see that A is going to be a number. You can say number yourself, and then the help text goes away. So that's one that's really nice to use. Another cool thing that we've been working on, maybe more on the TypeScript side, less on the editor side, is really helpful support for your day-to-day coding in TypeScript. So let me give you an example because it's kind of hard to talk abstractly about this. So I use this sort of example a lot because it's nice and simple. So let's say that we have a type in TypeScript called circle and a type called square. And what we're doing is we have a kind field in both. And what we're saying is that a circle will always have a kind field where the text is circle, and the square will have one with the text square. And then you can define something called a shape, which is either a circle or a square. And the cool thing about this is TypeScript does something called narrowing based on how you do runtime checks in your JavaScript. And this way, you don't really have to think about what sorts of convincing you have to do for TypeScript, right? So as an example, let's say that you have a shape here. A shape is really a circle, a square, or square. So I'll just inline that so it's a little bit easier to see. When you check if the kind is a circle, is the text circle, in that branch, we're able to do some sort of analysis to say, now it's a circle. And if we even remove the if check here, we can say that if it's not a circle, it must be a square. And now you're able to get this side length. Let's call it side length there. And so that's super helpful. However, well, let me just give a little more context. You don't have to do any sort of casting, right? In some languages, once you do a runtime check, you have to say like, okay, I know it's this, so I have to like say what the type is. TypeScript does this automatically. However, one of the things is that I'm going to jump in my time machine and I'm going to go into an older version of TypeScript. Maybe that didn't quite work. So let's just stick with this version of TypeScript, which is the new one. In older versions, if I decided to take this out and put it into its own variable, I could call this a circle. What would happen is previously we would lose track of the information to say what the type of shape is. We would just say that it's still a circle or a square. And that's because what we did is we introduced this layer of indirection, this constant that basically is all we see about it is that it's a Boolean, right? In newer versions of TypeScript, we'll say, oh, well, that's a constant, but does it actually do any sort of analysis on any of the variables in this branch? And so here we're able to preserve the fact that this is what's called a type guard, right? Like it's a condition on some variable. So that variable is shape here. And so we can actually still do the narrowing and it just all still works. And this was a major pain point for users because basically, you just want to write the sort of code that you wanted to write in JavaScript. Like TypeScript shouldn't get in your way. You shouldn't be fighting a type system. And so, that sort of convincing makes programming really annoying, right? And it was at odds with something like refactoring, right? Like hoisting something into a variable so you can reuse it later is just something that you'd like to be able to do. And so as an example, this can go a little bit deeper. So let's say that we wanted to do a shape equals check. So what we might say is if a dot kind is equal to circle and b dot kind is equal to circle, then we return a dot a.radius is equal to b.radius. So let's say that this is the first thing that we write for our equals function. Well, now we can start, refactoring away, and everything just gets preserved. So we can say A is circle, points this out to B is circle, and then hoist both of these out into both our circles, right? And so even though I've added like several layers of indirection between these things, we're able to say, oh, are both circles? Well, we see A is circle. Is that a condition? Yes, it is. So now we actually know that we need to change the type of A as it flows here, right? So starts out as a shape, ends up as a circle. Same with B. And so you could do the same thing with squares in the other branch. So this is something that is just makes your day-to-day coding a lot easier, and it's a frequent pain point that we heard from TypeScript users, both starting out and both very experienced. And I mean, those are some of the bigger features that I think you can notice, that will stand out. We have a lot of smaller features as well that I'm really excited about too. And so, like, for example, if we see something that's deprecated, we'll know to put that lower in your completion list. Like, there's a lot of little polish that ended up in TypeScript 4.4 too. And a lot of it actually got contributed by external users, like that deprecation thing where, let's say we're using the global name, that's going to be crossed out. I mean, it's going to show up lower than a lot of other more relevant completions, for example. And that inlay hints feature that I showed you, these were both things that came from the external community, right? One contributor named Alex Tarasuk and one other named Wenlu Wang. And so we have a really healthy community that we appreciate, having made TypeScript a much better language with much better editor support too. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm up for it. You should all give it a shot. You should all try out the latest and greatest VS Code. I'm using insiders just because I can't get enough of that. So.
Well, that was awesome. The inlay hints is crazy. I actually was working on a project last week and I saw it come up, and I thought it was coming from an extension, but it must have been coming from TypeScript 4.4, which is really cool. A couple questions from the chat here. Ryan Kim just said, what is the default shortcut to trigger the inlay hints? Show variable param names.
So I don't believe we have a shortcut right now. That's one of the things that we've been thinking about. There have been discussions of like maybe we could use a keyboard shortcut to actually display them, and that way you don't have them present all the time. But right now you have to enable them manually in your settings area. So just search for inlay hints. And you should be able to turn those on, and maybe in the next VS Code we'll be able to turn those on a little bit more gradually. We'll have we might have a keyboard shortcut, but it's still something that we're kind of ideating. And that's the cool part, is it's always getting a little bit better. We can take smaller steps to making a much better experience overall.
So I think the other thing that I'm learning here, Daniel, is that we probably need a whole stream dedicated to TypeScript, and I'd like to know what the chat thinks about that. Maybe like a TypeScript Pro, Advanced TypeScript, Beginning TypeScript, something like that session. I think that would be awesome. We're going to have you back. I know it's early in the morning for you, and I also like the fact that that you have to get up early. That makes me happy. So we'll have to have you back on to do more TypeScript. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Sun already heard an earful from me about that, but yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, no sympathy. There's no sympathy. Look, we have people on the call. It's like 5 a.m. for them. They're here. So thank you so much, Daniel. Let's get right into it. Our last presentation is from Tana. Hey, Tana, what's up? We've got some improvements to notebooks in Visual Studio Code. What's the story?
Yeah, okay, I'll jump right into it. So if you guys follow the blog, VS Code blog, on the VS Code site, and I think you can subscribe to it, we had this blog post out last month about how we revamp notebooks. So you can give it a read, but I'll do a little TLDR here. So essentially, we revamp notebooks to do two things. One is to move it into the core, and two is to make it feel more closer to VS Code and not like a separate experience. So I'll tackle one first. So what does moving into the core mean? So before, we actually already had notebooks for a couple of years, but it was contributed by the Jupyter extension, which I can, that's not it, which I can show you. It was contributed by this extension, and it was essentially like a separate experience from VS Code. And it was made on this, what we call a web view, which what you can think of it as like an independent, isolated website within VS Code. And what that means is it doesn't really have that much interaction with the rest of VS Code. Essentially, it just runs on its own. But the fun part about VS Code is there's so many extensions, and you want to be able to use all your extensions like bracket paracolorizing or to-do highlighting or whatever, and you couldn't get all those features within the Jupyter notebooks. So part one, what we want to do is we want to bring notebooks into the core. So now notebooks can actually be opened without an extension. So as you can see, I don't have the extension installed because we have a built-in extension that actually renders notebooks for us using built-in APIs and just the built-in notebook infrastructure that we built into VS Code for the past year. And then as well as we've also changed the layout to make it feel more like VS Code. So as you can see, I was actually able to open this notebook without having the extension. I can edit, so I can go, hey, hi, and I can hit Control Enter to save it. So I can do all my edits and everything without actually having the extension. But when I want to run it, so let's say I want to run this notebook, which is essentially analyzing Washington State COVID data from this CSV over here. So when I want to run it, that's when I need the Jupyter extension to help me figure out where Python lives in my machine. So let's go grab the extension. Let's install it. Cool. All right, and cool thing is the Jupyter extension detected that I last used Python 3.85, so it automatically selected that. And yeah, let's just jump into the actual layout of the notebook because it's changed quite a bit since the version that was contributed by just the Jupyter extension. So the first major change that you'll notice is how you can insert cells. So you can either use the notebook toolbar up here, or you can use this hovering toolbar here, which only shows up when you cross over this area. So I can insert a code cell, and let's just run that. Cool. And then I can also insert Markdown and add everything that you would normally expect from Markdown. I can do that all over here. Another new UI element we added was this cell toolbar. So it allows you to run cells all up above and all below. So I'll actually use this feature here because I don't need to install this library anymore. I already have it in my machine. So I'm going to click on this cell, which is the beginning of my notebook work, and I'm going to run below. And you'll see that all these cells are set up to queue to run. And what's happening here is it's first just grabbing the library, reading my CSV, and then printing what my CSV looks like. And then I said, hey, I don't actually want total cases. So I removed total cases. And then as you can see, there's no total cases anymore. And then, oh, one sec. There we go. And then I can also plot. So here, I think I was just plotting all these columns just by pure count. So that's another big UI change. And you can also, there's a split cell button. So I want to split at this line. And it actually ends up creating another cell right here, but that I don't actually want that. So I'm going to do Command Z or Control Z. So all your Control Z or Command Z, V, C, like all that will work, copy paste. You can move cells around. So something different from the Jupyter layout is usually you have like an up and down arrow to move cells around. But in VS Code, we just have a drag and drop. So you'll see this little like cursor hand, and you can drag it up here, drag it below. We also have a table of contents over here. So it lives just on the side, just like a normal code file, you'll see like an outline. So here you'll also see where the table of contents, you can click on it and, I think I'm at the there. So it's already on the screen. So let's do plot spread. So I go to a different part of the screen. And we also have a thing called the variable explorer. So I can click on variables, and you'll see that I can actually see what this variable COVID data looks like. So I can actually click on this icon, and it opens up a CSV style view. It's a big file, so it's just taking a couple seconds to open. But you can see that you can actually like work with it just like you would in Excel. So it has really basic operations like sort and I think find, but that's about it. It's not super complex, but it's just a way to view. I think with the stream and with the large file, it's slowing down, so I might close this, but you can see it from there. And yeah, those are like the main changes. You can also view diffs. So you can see, hey, I changed this text. I added some output. You can see like all the changes that happen. And you can sometimes, not with this, but like with simple outputs, you can actually see like, oh, this is the output that I changed as well. So this is cool. Let's go back. Let's close this. Going back, so this is cool, but you know, like I like to customize my experience. I'm using a different theme. I also want to customize my experience on notebooks. And one of the other benefits of moving it into the core is we can add all that customizability. So if you click on this gear icon, you'll see customized notebook layout, and you end up with a settings editor that's focused on all the settings that allow you to change things in the layout. And there's a lot here, so I won't go through all of them, and you can play around them yourself. But I'll touch on a couple. So let's say when I select this cell, you'll see this blue line. And let's say I don't really like that, and I actually want a border instead. Then you can see it's changed the border. What else? Right now, this cell toolbar is on the left side, but I actually like it on the right side. So I'm going to change it to being on the right side, or I can even just remove it if I'm not a fan of it. You can on the right side. There's quite a lot here. Something that I like is the consolidated run button. That's a kind of a cool one because I like this to be as clean as possible. So now those like run all below, run all above got moved into here, which is really nice. So because I don't run that too often, so I don't want it in my face all the time. And there's quite a lot here. Feel free to play around with it. We're always adding new ones. So if you're on Insiders, you'll always get the latest settings. Yeah, cool. I think that's all I want to share today.
All right. Well, Tana, we've had a lot of comments during your presentation, and most of them, look, I'm sorry about this. I'm just the voice of the chat. That's all I am here. Most of them are about the fact that you're using a light theme. So we have TXKO, hashtag save our eyes. Let's see. JNSP says, please use dark mode. I'm gonna quit this live stream. Listen, folks, you can have a light theme or you can have a dark theme. There are some people who think that dark themes are better for your eyes, and those people are wrong. And that's okay, right? Tana, that's okay.
Yeah,
we don't
I
all
love
have to
the light theme.
like the
I feel
same
like the
thing.
dark theme is a little mainstream now. You know, I feel hipster being the.
I'm kidding. All right, let's see if we have any notebook-related questions here. Looking through our chat, we had a ton of comments. Let's see. Sarav said, might be helpful on a separate video on Jupyter Notebooks only. Huge changes here. Didn't we do a live stream on?
We could do another one. We did one in the past for the Notebook API, which you can actually create your own notebooks. So if you look back in the YouTube channel, you'll find that. But if you want to create your own notebooks for VS Code, you can.
That's
but
true.
we can do.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But we can do another one on just Jupyter Notebooks exclusively as well. I think we also had one on that too, but we can do another one. There's
like
always
changes. Yeah, we can do another. Yeah. So Draconia, you have a lot of letters, numbers in your name, so I hope I said that right. Are there any plans for a C# notebook style format?
Not yet, but actually, well, we do. We have the .NET notebook, so you can. I don't know what style format exactly means, but if you want to use C#, you can use the .NET notebook. Sorry, I keep clicking on this. I don't know why. .NET Interactive. You search .NET Interactive. We have the .NET Notebook, which you can use C#. I don't know what style means exactly. I was for a second thinking about themes still, but you can use the .NET Notebook if you want to use C# in your notebooks. C#, F#, several languages actually. The .NET Notebook supports several.
All right, well, we're over time, 5 minutes over, so we probably should wrap it up. Lots of other comments about your theme selection, Tana, but I think we've sufficiently addressed that. We get it. Some of you really like dark themes. Thank you so much for being with us, Tana, to talk about Jupyter Notebooks. Thank you, chat, for being with us. We enjoy all your comments, even the ones about the themes. Yes, they're all legitimate. Thank you for being here. Thank you for hanging out with us. We will see you next week, Thursday, 10 a.m. Central Time, 8 a.m. Pacific Time for our live stream. Have a great day and a nice weekend. See you then.